This video is something of a long-form response to a TikTok I made a couple of days ago. But before I get into how, I want to tell you a story, if you'll be so kind as to indulge me for a bit. If you know me, you know I'm the friend who's always missing when something exciting happens. I'm the kid in the nurse's office the day James Harden shows up to gym class. I'm the schmuck with a curfew the night Beyonce hosts a fundraiser concert for the PTA. And in college, nothing really's changed. Granted, I prefer to stay out of the limelight. It's why I don't post online or make small talk. But on this particular day last semester, my friend sent me a picture of themselves all together wearing crimson 45 to 47 MAGA hats and posing next to conservative commentator Charlie Kirk. To summarize his character, if you're not familiar with Charles, he's evangelical Christian known for being anti-abortion, anti-immigration, anti-secularist, anti-social justice, pro-school choice, pro-Zin.
So you know how the Democrats, they're trying to take away our Zins? And I want to know what Trump's going to do to keep Zins in my mouth.
The Democrats and Chuck Schumer have proposed a 100% tax on Zins.
Boo!
Donald Trump has said no tax on Zins and hands off your Zins.
Hands off my Zins!
Pro-small government and a free market capitalist. He's a full-throated MAGA Republican, to sum up his ideals. And if this video gets 12 likes, I'll post that photo of Kirk and my buddies, potentially derailing those girls' careers for life. In all seriousness, I don't think my friends co-sign all of Charlie Kirk's beliefs. I think they just found it to be a funny, absurd opportunity, something they could flex on me about. That day, Kirk was on campus for his You're Being Brainwashed tour, where he and other serious political personalities like Vivek Ramaswamy, Bryce Hall, and George Janko rallied support for Trump's 2024 campaign. Kirk brought along his Prove Me Wrong segment, which was ripped from the now disgraced Steven Crowder's Change My View. Of course, the format of college Q&As featuring political figureheads is not new. It's a tradition with a long and diverse history. Take the Oxford Union formal debates, which have for over 200 years hosted a number of controversial figures, including Malcolm X, Marine Le Pen, David Irving, George Galloway, Steve Bannon, and O.J. Simpson, among others. In the US, we've carried on this tradition of young people questioning the dogmas and power structures that govern social discourse, often pushing back against more conservative institutions. This spirit has only intensified in today's partisan, profit-driven media landscape. In the social media age, it's become a breeding ground for a more degenerate form of debate. So here's the video I posted. I won't re-argue the topic or give full context here, but I want to summarize the response I received. In the video, I pointed out the dangers of a trend in which people challenge racist viewpoints by stitching a white supremacist video and then simply showing their own physical appearance. It's a kind of gotcha, you're ugly and I'm hot move that relies on the halo effect and ultimately does a disservice to people of color as a collective. So I asserted. The comments were mixed. Many were against my line of thinking because either A, racism and racists are purely illogical and unworthy of serious argument, B, people of color owe nothing to those who hold backwards beliefs, or C, while the tactic may be manipulative, it works as an effective anti-racist propaganda tool and is therefore a net good. To me, this spectrum of disagreement illustrates why tensions between identity groups have ballooned in the current decade. More broadly, it reflects these three beliefs. 1, the other side is irredeemably stupid, so I should fight fire with fire and become like them. Or 2, my view stems from basic human morality. If you can't overcome your prejudice to agree with me, that's something you have to learn on your own. Or 3, yes, my approach may be flawed, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a net positive in the use of propaganda and manipulative media. These are all positions that anti-racists must learn to temper through effective messaging, and messaging that pro-racists or anyone else on any side of the aisle learns to wield well in order to carry and spread their ideas. That is because they all create roadblocks that I'll delve into one by one, starting with the first. First off, we must consider what we mean by stupid. There are plenty of educated, well-read racists who are certainly more pernicious than your average hillbilly spouting hateful rhetoric in a trailer park, because those bigots wield a prowess with words in a way that ensures the systemic oppression of the disadvantaged. Furthermore, racists themselves heavily engage in pseudo-intellectual exploits of phrenology and sociology, which speaks to the fact that knowledge isn't the sole gatekeeper of virtue. Rather, it's a willingness to critically engage in a manner that is respectful and isn't tainted by prejudice. Many racists are racist because they're disadvantaged themselves, a phenomenon that Berkeley sociologist Arlie Hochschild deems the pride paradox. Rooted in intersectionality, explains the modern consequences of a tradition of personal accountability, or American individualism, which leads many poor white regions to breed a culture of victimhood, falsely blaming Democrats or people of color or Republicans for their subjugation, rather than the capitalist barons feeding them the promise of retribution through the elimination of things like DEI, which to the lesser educated or less bureaucratically literate is a synonym for the unfair treatment of white people. That is to say, lots of racism that occurs today is reactionary. It feeds on the natural sentiments of self-preservation that exist in you and I, amplified by the whispers of the wealthy. Anybody can succumb to it. So to accuse the people you disagree with of being hopelessly moronic feeds into the opposing attitude, because you are not offering a useful counter, merely an insult. Moreover, it ignores the fact that changing your mind doesn't rely on someone being exposed to endless literature arguing the contrary. You can lead a horse to water, but how will you make her drink? If I hand you a stack of books, what is forcing you to read them? Thus, change my mind only necessitates the courtesy to engage with a person from where they stand. Granted, it doesn't allow for the sort of rigid hierarchical thinking of I'm morally superior to another, and it's exhausting on the part of people of color or those facing the truest form of subjugation, but you have to remember that we exist in an era of privilege and oppression Olympics. There are many who feel the same anger towards the system that surrounds us because their silver spoon isn't encrusted with diamonds or plated in gold like some other people. Acknowledging that stupidity is a temporary, common condition rather than a permanent defect of mind is fundamentally the only active ingredient needed for a dialogue that debases the dumbness of racism and hate with kindness and understanding. Friendship is magic, guys. By agreeing to discuss things like Auschwitz, one begins to lose one's humanity. Here's a quote from Noam Chomsky that isn't about racism per se, but rather anti-Semitism in the wake of the Holocaust. It was said during his debate with William F. Buckley Jr., a father of the modern American conservative movement who ran one of its longest and most successful debate shows, Firing Line.
In one of his essays, Mr. Chomsky writes, quote, "By accepting the presumption of legitimacy of debate on certain issues such as this one has already lost one's humanity." I should like to begin by asking him why, under the circumstances, if by being here he stands to lose his humanity, he consented to appear in the first place.
Because, first of all, I didn't quite put it in those terms, I don't think. I think that yeah, but I think that I said that there are certain issues, for example, Auschwitz, such that by consenting to discuss them, one degrades oneself and to some degree loses one's humanity, and I think that that's true. Nevertheless, I can easily imagine circumstances in which I would have been glad to debate Auschwitz. For example, if there were some chance that by debating Auschwitz it might have been possible to eliminate it or to at least mitigate the horror of what was going on. And I feel the same way about Vietnam. And I really think that fundamentally there is no argument anymore at an intellectual level, in my opinion. But I think it's very important to discuss it nevertheless.
Buckley spoke like this, so people thought he was a clever guy. But he also happened to be wrong about literally every single possible issue there was. A Vietnam war hawk who regretted that we didn't use nuclear weapons in the region. Buckley argued that the US had a moral and legal commitment to give aid to the South Vietnamese in resisting aggression, pursuant to the protocol that extended the CEDAW Treaty to that area. Chomsky was willing to argue topics like the legitimacy of North and South Vietnam's governments, even though the US had firmly taken the side of the anti-communist Southerners. However, he was careful to carry out these discussions in a way that wasn't seeking to ascertain the human value of the Vietnamese people, nor their culture, nor anything else in that territory, unlike mega-racist Mr. Buckley. Similarly, while Chomsky was still willing to argue about Auschwitz, he made a point about being careful to do so in a way that didn't debate or hold hostage the basic human value of the Jewish people. His reasoning was that the collapse of institutions, however painful or politically chaotic, isn't something worth folding your principles over. I make this reference with respect to the idea that black people and people of color are constantly asked to toe a line when engaging in necessary generational conversations that toy with their humanity in the same way. The kind of line where, just by showing up to the conversation, you're tacitly accepting that your basic worth as a human being is up for debate. That's the sort of rhetorical game Chomsky refuses to play, because the moment you enter that space, your dignity is already compromised. But still, I would argue, for many people of color, especially black people in America, that compromise is already made for them. Their humanity is already subjective, at least in the eyes of the people they're being asked to convince. And when you're faced with such total disregard, a biological, sociological, philosophical, and even religious condemnation of what makes you a person, I believe you have everything to gain from indulging in a rebuttal, not because your worth is actually in question, but because the refusal to answer is often interpreted as silence, as surrender, or as proof. However, I do not believe the same principle applies in the case of the sneaky racist, if you will, the Charlie Kirks and William Buckleys and Ben Shapiros of the world who dip their toes into questioning your right to exist in the way you do, all while maintaining plausible deniability. And if anti-racists are to learn anything from Chomsky's example, it's that sometimes refusing to dignify a question with an answer isn't a weakness, it's a principled stand against a dehumanizing premise. So yes, our humanity is treated as a subjective, but that doesn't mean we must subject it to every stage, every mic, every baited question. There's a difference between defending your dignity and auditioning for it. One is an act of resistance, the other is a trap. Honestly, this third argument is one of the more unique ones I saw in response to my claim that we shouldn't be using looks to prove the worth of people of color. It's a utilitarian take and it's understandable. I actually think a lot of progressive comedy, which I enjoy, relies on making jokes and comments that toe the line between stinging satire and hateful language. Similarly, I get that TikTok is a platform rooted in entertainment, and so to counteract the problematic behaviors that develop, like white supremacy or internalized racism, we end up feeding into the chimp setting that the average watcher is already dialed into. This is done through progressive propaganda. There's not really a better word for it, and yes, I'm sure it helps some people, but it also sets people up to become more and more receptive to propaganda in general. Reconciling education with entertainment, comedy, and popularity is no easy task. It's where idealism meets the algorithm. And when it comes to mass communication, especially on visual platforms, we're often forced to ask, what's more effective, changing minds or racking up views? That tension produces what can only be described as a media war, a contest of who can produce the most palatable, eye-catching political dribble that manages to trick people into believing they're being radicalized for good. But in truth, it just sets the tone for how we perform politics online. It's Trump-branded Bibles, it's Pokemon Go to the polls, it's Big Sister General. It's content that appeals to our worst instincts, parasociality, lookism, personal bias, and it cultivates a consumer base more obsessed with vibes than values, a base that gleefully promotes and consumes propaganda, even when it reinforces the very power structures we claim to oppose. All because the aesthetic is right, because the person saying it looks right. In the context of my video, the notion of beauty itself is a concept deeply rooted in Eurocentric standards. That's not abstract. Those standards have been quantified, marketed, and sold. If I were to assert my own beauty, the empirical metrics used by social media wouldn't measure the texture of my hair or the wideness of my nose as assets or traits of beauty. They'd boil my desirability down to how closely I resemble a small, non-ethnic nose, plump but not too plump lips, lighter skin, a thin body, and straight blonde or brunette hair. It's a losing game for people of color to participate in because, like so many aspects of Western culture, it's a system constructed with our failure baked in, a system that demands our visibility while defining our worth by proximity to whiteness. So when we try to win it, we don't subvert it, we confirm its rules. We become complicit in our own erasure. So no, I'm not dismissing the potential of progressive propaganda to reach people, but when that propaganda relies on aesthetic appeal to validate human worth, it stops being revolutionary. It just becomes a prettier kind of submission. To succeed in the digital theater of politics, we must meet people where they are, not where we wish they were. We can't build our strategies on rigid terms of engagement grounded in our own ideas of morality, because morality is never neutral. It shifts depending on who's invoking it, hateful or not hateful, religious or secular, wealthy or poor. The only true baseline should be civility and mutual respect, and even then, those are courtesies our opposition is rarely willing to extend. If we insist on perfect conditions before engaging, or demand that our arguments be heard only under frameworks that serve us, we will lose the broader fight. Liberation is not something offered. It is not gifted out of goodwill. It is rarely even stolen. It is painfully, incrementally negotiated across generations against power structures that have no incentive to listen. In this kind of environment, facts still matter, but they must be delivered in ways that humans can actually process. We live in an era where people confuse instant access to information with understanding it. 1 billion search results in 0.2 seconds doesn't mean we've gained anything, especially when those results range from peer-reviewed studies to The Onion and less obviously bogus sources. If truth is to be effective, it must be repeated, accessible, and framed with care. That means ditching the lazy appeal to common sense, a phrase that has become a euphemism for unexamined bias and lazy logic. Common sense isn't common, and it's rarely sensible. Source your claims, or don't make them. Elevate the level of discourse, not just for the sake of being right, but to preserve the integrity of political communication in a space where every pixel can become propaganda. Your liberation depends on it. If you like videos like these, where I rant about a topic, I will make them every Monday and Friday, on the Mondays and Fridays that I feel like making videos. I will be making them regularly. Let me know what sort of stuff you would like to see, what sort of topics I should cover. I think I will also probably branch out into doing story times. Do people like that? Dislike the video, put down a hate comment. Thank you for watching. I really have to figure out like what I'm going to do about the fact that my computer will not stop shutting off every single time I try to film something. It's ridiculous, and I think it's my fault because there's got to be some sort of internal setting that would fix that. But I just don't give a shit. I don't care. Of course, the format of college Q&As featuring political figureheads is not new. It's a tradition. It's a tradition. Who speaks like that? This spirit has only intensified in today's partisan, profit-driven English. My nose itches. And when you're faced with such total disregard, a biological, sociological, philosophical, and even religious we live in an era where people confuse instant access. We live in an era where my computer will not stop shutting off.